Department of Journalism. Maraming salamat po sa pagdalo. Ang alam po namin may padating pa po, but it's 1:30, so magsimula na po tayo. Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome to the Signal Boost, the CMC Diamond Talks, to commemorate the 60th year of the College of Media and Communication, the Office of Research and Publication, in partnership with the Department of Journalism, organized forum as part of our Legacy Lecture Series. This initiative honors 6 decades of intellectual leadership, public service, and transformative scholarship in media and communication while charting bold directions for the future. Since the launch of the lecture series, we have convened a distinguished roster of senior faculty, pioneering scholars, and accomplished alumni whose work has shaped both the discipline and the nation's media landscape. Today, we are honored to have 3 of our distinguished alumni, all experts in their fields, to learn from their personal journeys and also their insights on critical shifts in media practice and theory. And to note also, as a lasting contribution to the college's intellectual legacy, their lectures today will be included in a publication of a commemorative monograph documenting their lectures and capturing the collective wisdom, aspirations, and challenges articulated throughout the event. So without further ado, I'd like to call on Dean Josa Labiste to give the welcome remarks.
To our esteemed lecturers and speakers, Professor Maria Tessa Jasmines, Mr. Froilan Victor Bacungan, and Mr. Jerrie Abella, colleagues from the Department of Journalism and also from the Broadcast Communication, our chair, of course, Assistant Professor Carol Ilagan, students, magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. This Legacy Lecture Series that we are holding this afternoon, as Carol said, is part of our year-long celebration of the college 60th anniversary. And of course, this is under the office, held under the Office of Research and Publication, in partnership with 3 departments and the 3 institute in our college. So, as Carol said, this Legacy Lecture Series invited selected representatives of our senior faculty and alumni to discuss the college's pivotal role in the personal and professional development. So we also invited prominent individuals or alumni who have made their mark in communication, media, and also the related fields. This is the sense of the idea of legacy. It refers to the lasting impact of the college and media on a person's life and the public contribution that this person will have in the years to come. So, of course, this talk will also discuss the intellectual and professional pursuits of lecturers. And we wanted the sessions to also interrogate media in relation to society. We want the discussions to touch on how social, political, and technological shifts are transforming the media and how media education impacts media innovation, ethics, and also vice versa. And this, we really think of this Legacy Lecture Series as a way to inspire current and future generations of media and communication practitioners, scholars, and students, and to help them understand the increasingly complex world mediated or constructed by the media. Sabi ng Carol, a related request or objective of this lecture series is to produce a monograph from the lectures of the series, the lectures of the series. So I encourage them to submit their lectures in an essay form for publication. So, as we said, this legacy lecture is part of our 60th anniversary. It's something that we should be proud of because it's confirms our impressions that this college has been true to its mandate of excellence and a people-oriented scholarship, that our students the public and this country will benefit from. So, congratulations to the journalism department for organizing this leg of the lecture series. At maraming salamat sa inyo.
Thank you, Dean
Josa. So, magsimula na po tayo sa ating mga lectures. Una po pong tatawagin si Mr. VJ Bacungan. VJ Bacungan is an award-winning multi-platform journalist who has written for various print, television, and online publications since finishing journalism sa ating pong kolehiyo, cum laude, in 2015. He is currently a contributor for the motoring section of the Philippine Daily Inquirer, where he regularly writes news, features, reviews, and special reports related to the automotive industry. DJ also specializes in data-driven road safety reporting, having been part of the Verapal's Road Safety Journalism Fellowship in 2017. As an academic,
research interests include the intersection of critical theories and automotive culture, authoring the pioneering gender representations in Philippine motoring journalism for his undergraduate thesis. Outside of journalism and the academe, VJ is a champion racing driver and serves as the race director and head coach of Gymkhana Philippines, a grassroots motorsport event that caters to newbie and veteran drivers alike. So everyone, please welcome Mr. VJ Bacungan.
Sparks. Diba? Wait lang. Okay, to Dean Jose Labiste, Associate Dean Lutangi, Professor Carl Ilagan, to the UP College of Media and Communication, I have to remember that, mas kung panahon ko eh. And also to the Department of Journalism, students and guests, magandang tanghali po sa ating lahat. Okay? Yes, my lecture is a scholastic approach to Philippine motoring journalism because this, I feel, is a field or a beat that doesn't have enough research done to it, apart from, I think, me. So, and there's a lot that can be done as we will uncover later on this lecture. Marami pong pwedeng gawin with this sort of journalism. No? Next slide, please. Yes, our presentation of 6 aspects. So I'll just introduce myself a bit more, and I'll talk about the Philippine motoring landscape. Stepping to the beat is effectively how you write for motoring journalism, and then how it has evolved into mobility. So hindi lang puro kotse-kotse yung trabaho ko, okay? And of course, where is the placement of motoring journalism in the academe? And of course, dahil nasa UP tayo, may works cited list ako dyan para I'm not plagiarizing anything. Next slide. Next slide. Yes, who am I? Next slide. That's me. Okay, so as mentioned, I graduated in 2015 here. No? So, medyo pangit lang yung lighting kaya lumobo yung mukha ko. And then that's me when I graduated, and then that's when I won my second Henry Ford Award for I think this was Inquirer na ba to? No, Autofan ata to. And then of course on the side, and in fact I'm also still a race car driver. So that's one of we were in Clark for that one, no. In fact, I'd like to make special mention to my 2 students. I have Renz De Guzman and Toby Garcia here, who are my drivers sa Gymkhana Pilipinas. So if you, for example, want to learn to drive in motorsport, you're more than welcome to join us naman, of course. Next. Okay, my career and my life has been surrounded by cars. Okay, so ever since I graduated and until now, I still review cars. I still primarily write about them and everything, you know. And but you'll see later on, it's more than just that, no. And of course, the highlight of my year, of course, for this year was reuniting with our speaker, Professor Tessa Jasmines. Kasi one of her clients sa PR is a tire brand. In-invite niya ako. Siyempre, I'll be there. Diba? Who am I to say no to Ma'am Tessa, diba? And of course, si Dr. Army Santiago, so isn't here, but she was also they were both my professors, actually, when I was still as thin as you were, and as lively as you were long, long ago, no? Next slide. Oh, this is my racing career. Right now, I'm still racing the BMW. And then, ito kami, yun yung ating event sa Caloocan. So we have events primarily in Metro Manila, but I'm also expanding into different parts. Anyway, that's enough about me. Next slide. Ito yung seryoso na pang-UP na usapan. Philippine motoring landscape. Next. 2025, this year, is a record-setting year for the car industry. Kasi there's a target. They are targeting an estimated 500,000 unit sales, brand new cars in the Philippines this year. This is, last year it was 469,000. So we also have the highest level of domestic automotive manufacturing since the martial law era, with Toyota investing 5.5 billion pesos to produce a Toyota Tamaraw in the Philippines. Okay? We also have programs like the Comprehensive Automotive Resurgence Strategy Program, where the government is budgeting 27 billion pesos to promote local manufacturing in the Philippines. So if you've seen yung mga brand new na Vios, Toyota Vios, or brand new na Mitsubishi Mirage, they're all made here in Santa Rosa, in Laguna. Okay? They're locally made cars. Effectively, what all this means is motoring is a very newsworthy sort of field, no? Hindi lang siya, most of you, I think, siguro would have read a car magazine or nakapanood sa TikTok or sa YouTube ng mga car things, whatever. No, that's only one aspect of siguro that's the most glamorous part of the job. But actually, there's a lot more things we can cover in this field. Next. Okay, one field that we are looking into right now, if you notice, these are electric cars. You might have seen them, yung pag nasa mall kayo, may ka-plug-in na kotse, na ganon, you know. So these are both BYDs. No, that's a Seagull and that's an Atto 3. Next. Electrification is actually a growing trend in the motoring industry because RA 11697 provides a law. The law provides a framework for the development of electric vehicles in the Philippines. So that includes mga charging stations. In fact, they're requiring the government to have minimum 5% of their fleets na electric cars. There's a even private companies are being mandated to have this. And of course, may mga non-fiscal incentives like exempted sa coding or what have you. Although actually, before I proceed, who here owns a car, drives a car or anything? Or nagko-commute kayo? Commute, the all commuters are, okay, good. May mga commuters pa sa UP, that's good, that's good. Okay. Also, Executive Order 12 lifted all import duties on electric cars. Effectively, if you import an electric car from China or Korea or whatever, the government will not impose a tax on that import anymore to promote the sale of these vehicles. And the industry says that we are expected, the sales of EVs in the Philippines are expected to reach 6.6 million by 2030. So it's a big market. Economics-wise, it's a big market to look at. Next. Okay, kilala niyo siya. Like maybe you kids might have been too young to remember that one, but who knows this one? Ma'am, alam niyo, ma'am, ano pa lang mga kayo? 35 pa lang naman kayo, ma'am, di ba? No, any guesses who's this tortoise? Who remember? Kung Fu Panda, yes. Anong pangalan niya? Si Oogway, very good. Okay. Let's have a little game. Paunahan magtaas ng kamay. There's a quote from Oogway that's very, there are blank, blank. Okay, so if you know the answer, 1, 2, 3, chug. Wala. Hindi nyo naalala. Renz, no, wala. No, actually, one of the quotes ni Oogway from Kung Fu Panda is, there are no accidents. If you remember that one, no? And that's a great segue for my next discussion. Next. Road safety, when we look at road safety, all road crashes are preventable. We don't call them accidents anymore in the field. The UN, WHO no longer uses the term accident because an accident is hinged on the premise that it's inevitable. There's no proximate cause. But all road crashes have a proximate cause. Lasing yung driver. sira yung auto, nawalan ng preno, the favorites of Filipino drivers. The road was slippery, all these kinds of things. Ergo, they can never be accidental. Okay? And in the WHO in 2023, in their Global Road Safety Report, said that 1.19 million people were killed in road crashes in 2021. And here's a much more shocking statistic. Road crashes are the number one killer of people aged 5 to 29. Not heart disease, not any lifestyle disease, road crashes. Nasagasaan sila, they were riding their bicycle, they got hit by a car, or tipong, diba? That's a shocking statistic. And that definitely makes it newsworthy, and we definitely have responsibility to as media, to be part of that conversation. So road crashes also are more than just about losing loved ones. Yun yung pinaka-trip ng mga TV network, yung mga umiiyak sa lamay ng mga which is a story in itself. But the bigger picture is generally not being seen. There's burdens on the healthcare system. There's burdens on the infrastructure. There's burdens on law enforcement. And these road crashes are reflective of these things. Next. Again, road crashes, according to the WHO, account for around 3% of a country's GDP. If we use the computations of the World Bank in 2024, that means we lost around 833 billion pesos to road crashes. Tayo galit na galit tayo sa mga congressman na magagandang kotse tas nagnakaw dun sa flood control. This is another thing that we can get mad about. And we should be mad about. Because again, road crashes are entirely preventable. Huh? We have so many traffic safety laws: drunk driving law, anti-distracted driving, motorcycle helmet act, child restraint law, but these are very poorly enforced, as with many laws in the Philippines, no? Except sa pangungurakot, magaling sila doon, no? Now, also, effectively, the social, political, economic, and cultural aspects of road safety make these topics particularly suitable for journalistic inquiry. That's also something that I do, because I did a fellowship for WHO as a road safety reporter. So we did a lot of road safety. My stories were about vehicle safety standards, crash testing, those kinds of things, no? But again, there's so much that can be explored from this one. Next. Also, this college has a particularly strong affinity to road safety because of Professor Chitistella, who actually when the year that I got into UP was also the year she died. If you remember, she was killed in a road crash in Commonwealth. She was coming out of her taxi, and she was hit by a bus. Okay, so this was 2011. I wrote about 10 years after. I wrote a story about how it was still in the regional trial court, and only last year lang na-convict yung drivers kasi may kumakarera yung dalawang bus effectively, and it ended up slamming into her taxi cab, and then this is the road safety marker, and that's where the 60 km/h speed limit on Commonwealth came from after that incident, no? And only last year lang na-convict yung dalawang bus drivers. Guess how many years they get to go to jail? The prison sentence, 2 years. For both drivers. They were found both guilty, but 2-year prison sentences. Of course, may mga fines and civil penalties, pero imagine mo, after 13 years, there was justice for Ma'am Cheat, but for me, when I saw the story, it feels lacking. And all of the years na she's been gone, diba? There were so many students that she could have inspired, diba? So that's why road safety is particularly important. This college in particular has a strong connection with that topic. Next. Okay, let's go to something a little stepping into the beat of motoring. Next. Hi, Jeff. Come in. Okay, Philippine motoring journalism. That's also my student, si Jeff. Substantial shift to multimedia content since 2015. So hindi na masyadong uso yung mga magazine na like Top Gear, Autocar. That's not so popular anymore. They're all online. Visor, I'm sure you've all heard of Visor. Oh, that's technically a motoring publication, diba? Pero if you look at their content, it's not just about brand new cars. No? Broadsheets like mine, we're still alive kahit papano, we maintain a motoring section for print and online. So all my stories I run every Wednesday and Sunday sa Inquirer, no? And there's also the rise of content creators. We have Real Ryan, Makoy Dubs, James Deacon, and of course our very own Ramon Bautista is a big name in the local car scene. He's a prof sa film department, I'm sure you know. Next. So the story forms in motoring are the same as practically any other beat. You have your news stories, nag-launch ng bagong kotse, may promo, there's new traffic laws, features, there are profiles, car meets, owner stories, special reports, road safety, corruption, infrastructure related, and of course opinion, yung columns, and then the car reviews. Diba? Just to disclose, part of my job, I get 3 to 4 cars a month to test, and then the manufacturer brings it, and then I test it, I write about it, and I give it back. So that's part of the work that I do as well. Next. Now, multimedia content has also become much stronger in the last 10 years. No, even Visor, for example, will just post about yung mga tanga magpark. So sorry for the parlance, but yung tanga talaga magpark. Na in fact they're causing inconvenience, they're causing whatever, and people will really engage with it. Kasi, diba, this is something as simple as parking, diba, is following the rules. Is something that's expected out of all of us na hindi na magawa. And of course, in my case, when I was working with one publication, we were apparently quite popular on TikTok. That's one of my videos on TikTok. Na was very hot that day. It was a very hot shoot. And one of the things we found on TikTok, for example, is Taglish works very well on that platform. If it's straight English, they'll just swipe to the next one. But if your openings, for example, nakahilata ako, in my case, on the back of a pickup truck, it makes people watch. Okay, I'm sure there's a class about that here sa CMC. Next. Now, ito yung medyo mas interesting na aspect on motoring, the mobility reporting. Next slide, please. Okay, mobility is a constitutional right. Okay, so since andyan si Toby, could you please read Article 3, Section 6 of the 1987 Constitution? Go ahead. Thank you, Toby, very much. Yan, the right to travel shall not be impaired except in the interest of so and so. You don't need an enabling law anymore. You don't have to create some sort of ordinance for it. We all have the right to travel, the right to be mobile, the right to go around without, it cannot be impaired. It should not be impaired. Diba? This kind of reporting now requires you to detach yourself from traditional car-centric reporting and view mobility as an ecosystem. For example, nagko-commute kayo, if I may ask, where to come to UP, saan kayo sumasakay, anong sinasakyan nyo? Anyone? Sir, how do you get to UP? So how do you get? You'll ride the jeep, Philcoa, and then pagbabaan mo sa Philcoa, lalakad ka na sa dito. Mag-jeep ulit. Coming in, so that's 2 jeepney rides. Is it the jeepney ride always, what time do you come to school? 8 o'clock. How's your commute? At that hour. Diba? As a journalist, you're gonna start asking those questions. Bakit nahihirapan siya pumasok? Bakit ang traffic? Bakit walang jeep? Bakit walang masakyan? Okay? We have to be part of that conversation. That's our responsibility to the public. That's our duty to the public to ask those kinds of questions. It's not about, we should all, it's yung mga, nagko-commute ako, bibili na lang ng kotse para hindi ako ma-inconvenience. No, that's the wrong way to look at it in mobility reporting. You look at this, how do we improve the system so that even if you don't own a car, which is the second most expensive thing you will ever buy in your life, if ever you will buy one, why are we not improving the infrastructure, the ecosystem? Why are we not making roads walkable? Why can't you just take a bicycle from Quezon Ave to here instead of having to pay for 2 jeepney rides? Diba? Nagsisiksikan pa kayo. Diba? Those are things that you can explore in mobility reporting. Okay? Next slide. So this is a great example, no? Good afternoon, sir. Horrible traffic jam. I'm going to be a bit late for the meeting. And sabi ng boss, we're waiting for you. Make it fast. And they're both stuck in traffic. Diba? And that's a reality that many Filipinos in urban centers face. Diba? Whether you drive or you commute, we all suffer the same problems. Diba? Especially if you're commuting at peak hours. Right? Next. So, one aspect of mobility reporting is actually traffic congestion and public transport. Okay? So traffic congestion, as we all know, is a product of decades and decades of poor urban planning, inadequate infrastructure, and arguably record high car sales. And record high motorcycle sales, kasi in the Philippines, motorcycles outsell cars around 3-1. So if you have 400,000 cars na brand new, there will be 1.2 million motorcycles sold every year. Diba? Sana natin pagsasasaksak yung mga yan. We're all stuck in, okay, we're in a car, naka-aircon tayo, we're listening to the radio, but we're stuck for 3 hours. Diba? And JICA already did a study on this. 3.5 billion pesos a day worth in productivity are wasted in Metro Manila road congestion. Okay? This is projected to reach 5.4 billion in 2035 if there's no intervention. Okay? So, yung pagko-commute, yung stress kayo sa commute nyo, yung pawis na kayo, yung naghihintay kayo hours and hours and hours, there's a cost to that. Diba? And, diba, billions a day. Not even the congressmen and senators dun sa flood control can do that. Diba? They were able to get that much money in a day. Diba? They had to wait a few projects before ito. It's just our suffering costs that much. Next. So, among the policies on traffic that the government implements are the Unified Vehicular Volume Reduction Program or number coding. So, yung ending ng plate, may dates na hindi kayo pwede. How did people work around that? They bought another car. So, that didn't exactly help, diba? Back then, people would just have one car for everything. Now they have 2. Kasi may pang coding diba? And then the newest resolution by the MMDA prohibits street parking during designated hours. Diba? Kasi now you have record high car sales and you have nowhere to park them. Unlike in Japan, since the 1960s, they have been required, you cannot buy a car in Japan if you have no proof of parking. You have to, and the police will not allow you to buy a car there. Diba? Siyempre, we're not that disciplined here in the Philippines. Basta kumita ng kumita, go lang ng go. Diba? So improving public transportation can address road congestion. And here's a classic example. Next slide. Oh, this is the EDSA busway. I'm sure you guys have seen this, no? Imagine nyo lang, each of those, 100 cars, diba? 100 cars, there's somebody in there, at least one person in there. And then in the bus, you have 50 passengers. Diba? What if you just put all that into that? In 3 buses. You can fit that entire row of cars in 3 buses. Would you think that the road will be a lot clearer, I think, if that were the case, diba? Isn't that right? So, there is a great importance in public transport, diba? As a public good, no? So that's one policy the government's doing. In fact, it's one of the better policies that the government's doing now. Next. And there is also the very controversial Public Transport Modernization Program. This used to be called, nung time called the PUV Modernization Program. So effectively, with PTMP, ang nangyari, will replace your fleet. You have to create cooperatives. Yung mga individual operators gagawa ng cooperative, and then they have to buy newer vehicles, diba? Na nakakaproblema yung implementation because yung microloans that they're supposed to have are also problematic, right? Among other things, diba? And also, the DOTR, the Transportation Department, has a public transport master plan for 2025 to 2055. As to what exactly they'll put in this, hindi ko rin alam. They're still working on it now. No? Given that traffic congestion and public transport are matters of significant public interest, we, the media, must be heavily involved in communicating its developments. It can be as simple as gagawa kayo ng vlog and then you show the misery of your commute. Pero since taga-UP tayo, we have to build on that. Okay, why is my commute so miserable? Okay, no, why is yung katabi ko ganto ganyan, bakit why is walking so difficult from here to here? These are stories that can be explored and have a substantial effect or impact on the communities we live in. Lalo kayo, since you're commuters. Right? Next. Also, thing with mobility reporting is the rise of non-motorized or active transport, no? Because you walk, you ride the bicycle, like in Europe, no? Now, these types of transport can reduce road congestion and pollution and promote physical health, diba? This is something I think I might need more now, no? But this gained prominence largely because of COVID. When there were travel restrictions at the time, they allowed people to use bicycles, diba? Pero there were not a lot of PUVs at the time. And it's stuck until now. Next. Okay, the DOTR is in charge of the Active Transport Strategic Master Plan, okay? This is something you guys can explore. They have identified 6 pilot project sites for this. NCR, Puerto Princesa, Iloilo, Surigao, Zamboanga, and Mati City. So they're gonna try to make infrastructure, they're going to try to make policies related to promoting active transport. Now they're going to roll out already, no? So the benefits of active transport in a country's mobility ecosystem. When we look at mobility, from the moment you step out of the house and walk to your first ride to wherever, until you walk to wherever you need to go or you arrive to where you need to go, that's covered by mobility reporting. That's how big the motoring car part is just one little link in that huge ecosystem. Okay? Next. Ito na, motoring journalism in the academe. Okay? So, nagkalkal pa ako ng thesis ko from kopong-kopong to make this happen. Ngayon, on ethics. I wish Ma'am Chua were here. Pero anyway, on ethics, no? Arguably, motoring journalists might be the most spoiled, as Ma'am Tessa was mentioning earlier, the most spoiled media practitioners. Na sinasabi niya na even sports journalists don't have the stuff that we have. So on a practitioner level, like individual practitioners, we're wined and dined weekly, as you may have noticed. May nag-expand eh. May mga raffles and giveaways. Minsan nagpapamigay ng TV, nagpapamigay ng overnight getaway, ganun talagang at saka we always have all expense paid trips to glamorous local and international destinations. For example, next week, end of the month, I'm flying to Tokyo for 8 days, all paid for by Honda. Kasi I'm part of their contingent of, I think, 20 people. No? And of course, the thing that most people the most visible part of my job that, in fact, even sila Ma'am Carol and Ma'am Tessa are asking, where are my press lendouts? The free cars I get to keep for a week. Na effectively, every week, I have a brand new car. Diba? Kaya I don't need to buy a car anymore. Actually, that's my job. Diba? So, in terms of an ethical level, if you do a Potter box, for example, you're gonna start looking at, okay, why are they throwing all this money and all of these perks and privileges on these practitioners? What is the consequence of that? Diba? And on a newsroom level, you have to remember, motoring sections are one of the largest revenue sources for commercial media outfits. Motoring, property, lifestyle. If you're gonna have a newspaper now, you don't have these 3, mamamatay kayo. Okay? And the ad money is huge. Millions and millions of pesos a month in order to maintain, which will help, of course, with the operations of your publication. Ang problem lang, syempre, if you have a paid content arrangement with these companies, whose agenda are we pushing here? Diba? What's happening is, These arrangements will push the agenda of capitalists at the expense of the public good. Car sales versus buy this car versus we need to promote active transport. Diba? So these are dilemmas that media practitioners and newsrooms face in terms of motoring. Next. Ang nangyayari, as with many soft beats, so to speak, editorial policies in motoring publications become a balancing act between being honest and comprehensive and maintaining good relations with your advertisers. Okay? So, ito lang, there is no research yet on ethics in motoring journalism. I checked. Since I left the college 10 years ago, wala pa rin. So, parang tumigil na yung research parang sa akin. Sabi ko, baka naman pwedeng sa inyo, ituloy nyo naman. Diba? Tulungan nyo naman ako. Baka, I'm not as young and dazzling as I used to look then. But the lessons of lifestyle journalism, there's a lot of research on lifestyle journalism, entertainment reporting, will be highly pertinent as I will demonstrate. Next. Okay. Yung study ni Perot and Beler-Gagnon explored the lifestyles of 30 lifestyle journalists in the United States. And I'll read this. More so than in other beats, lifestyle journ often struggles to attach itself to the normative expectations of journalism, given a stronger attachment to the audience and a stronger attachment to the marketplace. This connection to the marketplace reflects lifestyle journalism's historical dependence on advertising, a closer relationship between editorial content and advertising, and often extensive free products provided to lifestyle journalists. You just change lifestyle to motoring, it's pretty much the same thing. Okay? There's a lot of observations that can be made. Diba? And again, historical dependence on advertising, you have a relationship between editorial content and advertising. Sa J101, J102, that's a big no-no, traditionally. In traditional hard news journal, no, you're not supposed to do that. But in beats like mine, that's a reality. That's a reality in this profession. Next. Cheng and Avison also did that in Singapore. Same study. Quote, the highly commercial nature of lifestyle journ, which contradicts the enduring norm of journalism needing to be autonomous and free from commercial pressures. This contradiction now creates, effectively, lifestyle journalists to articulate a professional identity outside of traditional journalism. So we're going back to the duality here now of hard and soft news. Okay? Na some people say, hindi, motoring is soft. It's a soft beat. Diba? And we have our own rules. And then some would say, oh no, but those rules are not in line with journalism. Okay? We have to remember, motoring, journalism. Kung motoring lang PR, okay, that they have their own thing. But you're a journalist. Especially, you're going to be a graduate of this college. So we are the best, expectation you have to be the best journalist in the country. And, diba? So that contradiction emerges there, no? And given that motoring reflects or mirrors many intersections in these studies, many of these observations, there's a compelling reason to explore more thoroughly how on-ground practices in motoring affect individual practitioners and newsrooms. Diba? So, anong year na ba kayo, young people? What year are you already? Second year. Oh, malayo pa naman ang thesis. But this is something you can explore as a thesis topic. Okay? Or if you're gonna do IJ for your thesis, all of the things I've been talking about, not just ethics, are also IJ pieces. Diba? No, why is what about mobility for PWDs? There's a law there's an enabling law that requires them to have accessibility to everything, but not everybody follows it. Why? Diba? Next. Okay, critical look at motoring text. So that was me when I was around your age, and Ate Rax, namiss ko si Ate Rax bigla. This was when I turned over my thesis. My thesis kasi was gender representations in Philippine motoring print journal. What I did was conduct visual and content analyses of selected issues of Top Gear and Autocar to uncover how genders are represented in texts that have traditionally catered to heteronormative males. Not just males in general, heteronormative males. Okay? Uso pa bang heteronormative dito sa CMC? Is that still a buzzword here? or has studies moved on since I came here? No? Next. Effectively, in that study, I found 7 things. Okay? 1, women function as accessories or fragmented entities signified by their appearance. As si Dean and I were talking about kanina, when may car show, may mga models lagi sa car show. Or may mga, like in a men's magazine, in some car magazines noon, may centerfold na babae na naka-dress in naka-bikini or whatever, di ba? Number 2, men are not portrayed in the same way. You will never find a car magazine or at the time na may lalaking naka G-string, 'di ba? 'Di ba? Or naka topless or parang ganun, 'di ba? It just wasn't there, 'di ba? You see them, yung mga executives ng car industries, yung mga race car driver, ganun, ganda ng tsura. Wala namang, hindi man sila pinapahubad. So the question why, 'di ba? Bakit the girls are made to do that and men are not? Men are persons of power in motoring magazines and are considered superior to all other genders in motoring. Okay? I don't know if that's still true now. Kasi it's been 10 years and gender theory and sensitivity to gender has changed over this period, no? 4th key finding, which is quite interesting, women can be superior to men in motoring. Kasi my thesis, for whatever reason, ginalingan ko masyado yung thesis ko. I did the analysis, in-interview ko pa yung mga editor. So I asked them, why is it like this? Sabi nila, number 1, our readership is 80% straight men. And number 2, actually, they said, we don't mind featuring women in a certain, as in the same manner as men. We don't mind. It's just that the market or their market is demanding certain types of content. Okay? Number 5, members of the LGBTQ+ are portrayed negatively, if at all. Diba? And ito yung fun part, automobiles are gendered. Nagtatawanan kami kanina sa holding room kasi I was telling sila Ma'am Carol and sila Dean, diba? You do not give names to your washing machine or your microwave oven or your toaster. Pero yung kotse, si Bluey, si Red Horse, si Scarlet, 'di ba? Yun yung mga pangalan ng mga kotse, 'di ba? We give names to cars, 'di ba? 'Di ba? And we personify them. They become personifications, incorporate human-like identities and relationships. Oh, this is my baby. Yung mga car owners, ko to, alaga ko siya, this is my best friend, ganun, 'di ba? Men may let me down but cars won't, 'di ba? Ganun. So, these are one of the few objects, inanimate objects, and the car doesn't talk naman, di ba? That we have a relationship, we express human-like relationships and human-like attributes too, di ba? So that was one of the findings I found. I don't know if it's still the same now with the younger generation, but that's really what it's like. Next. Before I end, this is something that it will lower the tone unduly, but this is still covered by my topic. Because when we look at automotive culture, any culture, all cultures have artifacts. Culture, cars are cultural artifacts, diba? And again, when we look at the findings of representations and identities, ganon. If we look and the rise of new media, like mga pages na kung saan-saan, or if I were a journalist and I posted this, I'd be fired. Okay? Just to read, yung mga naka-Honda Civic talaga mga fuckboy. Even some of you laugh, diba? Like number 1, what is a fuckboy? Diba? This is an articulation of a certain type of heteronormative identity, right? With a very high sexual connotation. Number 2, bakit laging Honda Civic ang kinokonnote with that type of masculinity? This is from 2020. Diba? This is 5 years ago. At yung post pa, sumisibak ng single mom. But these are things that are in these texts. These are texts that exist. It's funny as hell for some people, pero parang, diba, bakit sa Philippines, a certain car gives the driver, the owner, a certain identity? And why is it generally that type of identity, that type of masculinity? Diba? And then you question, is it necessarily good? Is it necessarily bad? Diba? But just for you guys, so yung mga magtitesis sa inyo, this is something you could look into. Look at Facebook pages of car clubs and car groups, and then you take a look, ano yung pinagsasabi nila, and what is the, how do they articulate identities? So that's another thing you can do. So as I said, next slide, motoring Jorn is more than just cars. Okay, it's more than just, my job may look glamorous to my friends who are all car people, na I get to drive the newest cars, ganun. But it's more than just that. And substantial storytelling is possible. It's needed in this profession. We can't just talk about, oh, ito yung newest car, ito yung magandang kotse na to. Why is it so traffic in Metro Manila? Why are airports so terrible? Diba? Why are all the propeller planes being moved to Clark? How will I go home to the province if the plane that I'm using is in Pampanga and it's a 2-hour drive or 2-hour commute from Manila to the airport? Wala namang subway na or train. In fact, there is a train project that was supposed to be for that one, no? And again, motoring Jorn and all of the as a source of textual production is ripe for research in terms of the practice on ethics and whatever, and the text that it has. No? Finally, motoring journalism, kasi this series apparently is about niche journalism. So, and sports and then human rights reporting. No? I'd like to contend that motoring journ is not as niche as it seems anymore. And we need to take it out of the idea that it's soft and niche, that there is something substantial that underlies it. Okay? Next. Ay, tapos na pala ako. Maraming salamat po, and I'm Carol, to call the most glamorous the most glamorous speaker today.
Maraming salamat.
Salamat, DJ. I learned a lot actually. So, thank you.
DJ. So I think yun nga no, it's good to note that there's more to when we talk about motoring journalism, there's more to just the cars itself, but it's interesting to see that there's a lot that we can
Also report on, especially looking at how it intersects with other important issues like health and environment, mobility, even politics. Okay. Now,
we'll call on our next speaker. Ms. Tessa Jasmines is a homegrown CMC product with AB Journalism and MA Communication degrees. Right after college, she taught Intro to Communication, Communication Theory, Advertising, Public Information, Public Relations, and Sports Journalism in the undergraduate and graduate levels. Early in her teaching career, she followed her soul urge and became a sports writer, breaking ground as one of only 3 women who crashed into the then exclusively male profession. She wrote articles for Sports Weekly and Sports World magazine and ran her sports column, Part of the Game, for the Philippine Star and Business Mirror from the 1970s onwards. Somewhere along the way, she was invited by Ace Compton Advertising, now called Ace Saatchi & Saatchi, to join the PR and advertising industry, where besides pushing brands and advocacies, she learned about sports marketing. Today, she continues to be active in sports, still writes her column for the Business Mirror, runs media operations for sports leagues and events like the FIBA World Cup and the University Athletic Association of the Philippines, and operates her own PR firm called Lark and Asset PR. She retired as full-time faculty in 2012, but still passionately teaches Introduction to Communication and Sports Journalism at the college as a professorial lecturer. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ma'am Tessa Jasmines.
Thank you, Ma'am Carol, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you din, Froilan, sa maraming plug mo sa akin kanina. And then I'd like to, in advance, thank Tros, kasi siya yung aking magiging magikero ng slides dyan. And so parang magic lang silang a-appear, hindi katulad ni Froilan, ni VJ na next pa. Okay. So today, as Ma'am Carol said and Dean Diosa said, I will also talk about another niche topic, which is sports journalism. And if I'd like to beg your pardon, I will read what I'm going to lecture on kasi baka mag-ramble ako pag ginamit ko yung style ni Froilan. Okay, so I call it the endless game because it's not the oldest profession, but it's pretty old. It may not be sports journalism as we know it, but early man did have the good sense of recording his physical activities, conquests, and recreational adventures. Paintings discovered in the Lascaux caves in France reveal paintings not just of animals or geometric figures, but of physical activities of humans who were wrestling. The Cave of Swimmers in Egypt, a rock shelter with ancient rock art in the Libyan desert section of the Sahara, had figures of men swimming and doing archery. A Mongolian cave also showed a wrestling match with a crowd watching. Ancient cave art in Japan showed figures that appeared to be sumo wrestling. There was no media then, as we know them today, but it can be argued that rocks, walls, and other surfaces during prehistoric times were the media of that era. I'll go one step further and say that was sports journalism in the prehistoric era. So sports stories fascinate. When an individual or team wins in a competition or goes through an excruciating battle, they always want to talk about it. And people are always interested about the outcome. Then as now, sports stories are fascinating and very popular. So popular that if you remove the sports section in newspapers, radio, TV, and online websites, or even a social media content, news would be a bore. In a news landscape filled with matter-of-fact reports, sports news provide interest and excitement. Sports stories combine human drama with universal themes of competition, conflict, struggle, and triumph. Sports itself builds community and creates a sense of belonging. It lets people of different generations connect with each other and unites them in admiring personalities, teams, talent, skills, and the power of the human spirit. On the practical side, sports stories are top-notch entertainment. They provide escape, a light-hearted fascination about luck, and the drama of real-life struggles and achievements. Sports actually fuels economies, tourism, lifestyle, and fashion. In our modern world, sports has become really big. The sports industry generates billions of dollars in revenue annually. Sports fuels economic activity. Ticket sales, merchandise, broadcasting rights, sponsorships, athleisure wear, even sports betting platforms like Bingo Plus, 888, and Arena Plus generate jobs and revenue. Kahit mga kinakasal nga ngayon, naka-sneakers na lang, di ba? Ganun ka-pervasive yung influence ng sports. So, the infrastructure that supports sports like stadiums, training facilities, gyms, and sports complexes also invite huge investments and provide job opportunities. Even sports-related businesses like sports equipment manufacturers, gaya ng Mikasa, sport apparel brands like Nike and Puma, and sports media companies like ESPN, Spo TV, further contribute to job creation and economic prosperity. When a city or region hosts sporting events, it experiences a surge in tourism and local business activity. Yun yung nangyari when we hosted the FIBA World Cup in 2023, and more recently, last September lang, the FIVB Men's International Volleyball Championship. And then we are also going to host the inaugural 2025 FIFA Futsal Women's World Cup this November. And it's significant na dito gagawin yung kauna-unahang World Cup ng women sa Pilipinas. So there's money in sports. The influx of tourists, foreign and local, to these sports events benefits hotels, restaurants, and retail establishments. The economic impact of sports tourism can be substantial, providing a much-needed boost to local economies. But we digress. Sports journalism per se does not cover these economic and social repercussions of sporting events. What is true is that when sports is booming, sports media also booms along with it. Advertising money rushes into media that propagates the cult of sports teams, personalities, and competitions. And even brands, teams, companies create their own media to cover their brand sports activities and involvements. So why do you want to go into sports journalism, or why go into it at all? I got into sports journalism during martial law. Naku, hindi ko nabanggit kanina kasi Diamond lectures to, no? Ako pala yung Diamond girl eh. Kasi nung lumipat ako ng MASCOM from Fine Arts is my first course. Lumipat ako, sinigawan ako ng isang teacher doon. So, naiyak ako sa nervous ng dahil bata pa ako. Hindi pa ako astig. So, nung lumipat ako ng MASCOM, sabi kakatindig pa lang daw nung college. So, Diamond girl ako. So, I got into sports journalism nung time na yon, martial law. It was a time in history when our press was muzzled. But it was also the time when sports journalism thrived and blossomed. With every part of the newspapers, radio, or TV subject to censorship and review, practically every area of journalism during that time had no freedom or wasn't free, except the sports page. The sports page still enjoyed complete freedom to cover all sports and write in a free and independent manner. In fact, sports events and activities increased in number in those days. Sports was deliberately encouraged and cultivated by the Marcos regime for several reasons. First, Ferdinand Marcos Sr. was an avid sportsman himself and an inveterate golfer. Second, sports was a field that was neutral and non-controversial. And third, interest in sports would somehow keep the average Filipino entertained and distracted from the political aspects of martial law. So that period saw the birth and proliferation of magazines that were exclusively devoted to sports. Previously, you could only read about sports in the sports pages of dailies like the Manila Times, the Manila Chronicle, naku, hindi na alam ito ng mga kabataan ngayon, the Philippines Herald, the Manila Bulletin, the Daily Mirror, and the Evening News. Yan yung mga dyaryo ng araw before martial law. When martial law was declared in September 1972, all these papers were erased from the face of the earth, except the Manila Bulletin. Guess why? Because the owner enjoyed a special friendship with the then president. Si Hans Menzi pa yung dating publisher noon. So, out came new publications like Sports News, Sports World, Sports Weekly, and later, Champ and Scoreboard. I was then already teaching in the college as an instructor when the itch, no, the bug, no, the virus, to become a sports writer bit me. An exhibition game played in the UP gym featuring two big teams, the Eco Painters and the CRISPR Edmanizers, lalo namang hindi nyo alam yon, awakened a passion in me to be part of that world, parang si Ariel. It was my first ever experience to watch a game live, and after being part of all the color, action, energy, and hustle, a fire was lit that has not been extinguished to this day. I would escape from UP. Confession to. Kasi tinatakasan ko talaga nun si Dean Feliciano. After my class, umaalis na, kasi mga hapon yung yung course. Sabi ko, tapos ng klase, wala na akong ginagawa dito. May game doon. So tumatakas ako talaga. Nagpupunta ako sa Rizal Memorial in Vito Cruz to watch games. My favorite team was Eco, the legendary team. Mika pa siya, hindi pa siya PBA. Ganun katanda ha. That boasted of a 40-game winning streak. Can you imagine that? 40-game winning streak over 4 years, and made basketball history by winning 7 consecutive National Open Championships, 7 Mika titles, and the first Grand Slam in Philippine basketball. It was my dad's favorite team, and my dad was my sports buddy. By becoming a sports writer, I felt like I was honoring my dad, who was thrilled that I had crashed the boys-only club of sports journalism quite successfully. Sports journalism has given me the opportunity to find my sole purpose and express my passion. It has opened doors for me and given me definition. Many of the twists and turns, the great opportunities and experiences I have experienced in my many, many years of life, I owe to sports writing. It hasn't only made me practice my journalism education while keeping my teaching job at UP, it has opened up a parallel career for me in sports marketing and public relations. I have met and formed meaningful friendships with sports leaders, coaches, athletes, and brands through my sports connections. I'm also proud to say that together with 2 other female sports writers, namely Beth Celis, the lady beside me na Tisay, and Alice Lopez Lim, sadly, kasama na sila ni Lord, we blazed the trail for women sports writers to enter the male-dominated field of sports journalism. We were the only 3 women writing back then in the sports journalism community. How do you make it in sports? How do you make it in sports journalism? Okay lang yan, Tros. Keep it there. The usual way, write or apply directly to the sports editor. Show him or her your writing. Contact a friend who knows the editor and let him or her speak on your behalf. Volunteer. When I walked into the Sports World office back in the day, kasama ko pa rin ang tatay ko, I told the editor, I just wanted to write. They didn't need to pay me. Hindi naman daw pwede yun. So, they assigned me to write a harmless story about referees to test me. You will be tested, but you will get in. So, what makes sports journalism unique? Sports stories are different from news stories. They are more colorful, versatile, and resilient because sports journals have the license to capture the drama, color, sights, sounds, smells, and emotions of an event. You can flex your literary chops as a sports writer. You can be dramatic, funny, romantic, or poetic when you tell your story. Halimbawa, yung championship game natin, tingnan nyo naman yung emotion dyan, mangiyak-ngiyak, kahit yung mga lalaki na full-grown, umiyak dyan. So sports stories inform, but they also entertain. They place the reader in the middle of the action. They make them feel the suspense, the excitement, the frustration, and the euphoria of the competition. The best sports writers are able to make the reader feel he or she was there, watching the game live as well. So what are the perks of being a sports journalist? Sports journalists, like you may perks din kami ha. Hindi nga lang mahal. Pero sports journalists often enjoy their jobs because they can combine a passion for sports with their professional skills. They have direct access to amateur and professional athletes, coaches, industry professionals, and they're all able to cover sporting events for free. There are opportunities to travel the world by covering international events like the Olympics, the World Cup, the Asian Games, the SEA Games, and more. The young energy in sporting events makes journals and audiences highly energized and invigorated by the dynamism of the field. There are those who believe being in sports keeps them young. The career provides opportunities for creative expression through storytelling and analysis. Like singing or dancing, journalists can turn their love for sports into a career where they can fully express their passion and get paid for it. Many journalists find a sense of purpose in providing fair and balanced reporting to a passionate audience. And in some cases, this can include covering important social and political issues through the lens of sports. Kaya lang, for more practical souls, there is a downside. Sports journalists don't get rich because the pay doesn't make them rich. But for most sports journalists, being a sports writer is the best job in the world. Alam yan ni Prof. Ronin, na kabarkada ko sa UAAP since 2010, 2008, 2008. Yun. Grabe nahalata ka rin. If you're a sports buff and you love watching games, what the better job could there be but one that lets you watch all the games you want and get paid for what you do? You get ringside seats, get behind the scenes access, get to know the stars and protagonists of the sports, and establish a relationship with them. But also, the job can be taxing. It is high pressure and fast-paced, especially during major events, which require quick, accurate writing while working against deadlines. The hours are irregular. Mas madali mag-cover ng basketball kaysa volleyball in the sense na yung basketball is about 1 hour and a half long. Pag nag-overtime, except yung triple overtime, mga ganun lang hanggang 2 hours. Pero pag volleyball, 3 sets, halimbawa yung 3 sets na yun, extended sets, di tatagal na. Tapos nag 5 sets pa, na extended sets pa. There have been times na umuwi kami, kasi we're connected with the UAAP nga, umuwi kami mga 11, naabot kami na 11. Ngayong sa UAAP basketball, because we need to go with FIBA requirements, kailangan merong exposure yung junior high school, women's basketball, and men's basketball, all in one venue, all in one day. So, kailangan yung team ko will be there mga 8 a.m., pero nakakauwi kami na mga usually 9:30 p.m. or 10 p.m. Ngayon, magkaroon ka pa ng triple overtime, gaya nung nangyari sa Ateneo UST 2 weekends ago. Tapos yun mga 11. So, yun ang mga kinakaharap na sports writers. Tapos may deadline ka pa. So, still, there's also a need to adapt to, hindi pala. One of the challenges a sports journal faces these days is balancing journalistic integrity with fan engagement, adapting to new media platforms, and competing with their content. To summarize, low pay, erratic work hours, and the loss of a personal life. Yan, yung mga chicks dyan, gaya ni Miss Velasco. Ano yan? Hindi yan mag-sports writer kasi itatamper yung kanyang personal life. Are some of the sacrifices a sports journalist needs to contend with. So there's also the need to constantly adapt to new media platforms. Media formats and styles change fast these days. And sports writers need to be resilient and quick to adapt. They must also balance journalistic integrity with writing in a way to get more fan engagement. Yun yung balance between straight journalism and medyo magpapakute ka dyan, medyo mo ibababa ng konti standards mo kasi kailangan mo makakuha ng engagement, ng readership. So they must deal with the difficulty of getting across to those sources. They must, to their sources, meaning getting interviews. Ang hirap, may mga pakipot, may mga ibang schedule, hindi mo mahabol. So, yun ang mga challenges ng sports writer. They must also maintain objectivity despite having strong feelings about an event or a personality or a team. All these they need to balance with not so high pay, erratic work hours, and a lack of personal life. These are some of the sacrifices that they have to deal with. However, a sports writer truly dedicated to his craft treats these as mere givens and goes on to enjoy writing stories anyway. So what makes a good sports writer? A good sports writer is creative, imaginative, resourceful, and inquisitive, which are also the qualities of a good reporter. Over and above these, he must have an eye for detail, a good memory, and a feel for human interest. Because, as my sports editor in the Philippine Star, Lito Takuhan, said, when you are covering any sports event, there's always drama unfolding before you. So a good sports writer combines good writing, strong storytelling, and accuracy with a deep knowledge of the sport. He is objective, even when he or she has a favorite team. He can translate stats and game action into engaging narratives that capture the human element and drama of the event. He must also have the knack for research, fact-checking, and the ability to write under pressure. But sports writing and the media are changing. So, meron na tayong ibang-iba na ngayon ang sports writing. Doon sa field na pinasok ko, yung sabi ni DJ na, kopong-kopong pa. Today, sports journalists need to be more versatile than they were in the past. The digital age has revolutionized sports journalism and the way sports audiences consume sports news and analysis. Sports journalists now go beyond print media and television because of what's available, a range of digital platforms that can make them reach a wider audience, deliver news faster, in real time, plus give expert analysis as well. They can also do quick updates and edits on their reports with the new media. Sports journals now can write for websites, do blogs, vlogs, podcasts, and use social media to tell their stories. They can even do sports photography like Prof if they have the knack for it. Besides writing skills, they must also be able to take and post videos. Yan na yung bagong expected of sports writers these days. Some can even do graphics or work with graphic artists to enhance their storytelling. Because of analytics and in the current era that is obsessed with sports analysis, sports journals can provide fans with deeper insights into the games or the performances of their favorite teams or athletes. Given the chance, sports journalists can get out of the mold of basic sports reporting and go into deeper, more flourished writing of sports personalities or stories, gaya ng mga nababasa ninyo sa Sports Illustrated or sa Slam. They can also be tapped to write scripts for sports documentaries or movies, such as The Last Dance on Netflix or The Starting Five, also on Netflix. The possibilities are endless. So the game never ends. There will always be readers, listeners, and viewers for sports stories. Because now, as then, people love tales of human drama, of triumph over adversity, of intense competition that can lead to feelings of joy, disappointment, and community. Close scores, lead changes, so-called cardiac games feed our desire for uncertainty and suspense. Observing high-level technical and tactical execution by athletes and coaches lets us admire excellence in action. Clear opposing sides, intense rivalries like Ginebra San Miguel versus Magnolia, also known as the PBA Clasico, or Crispa Toyota in the past, or UP versus Ateneo, or uso-uso ito ngayon, UP versus LaSalle, create a visceral reaction in most fans. Visible physical exertion, like yung mga antics ni Harold Alarcon ng UP, are to die for some fans. Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal playing a 5-hour, 5-minute tennis match, or even just watching a basketball game with 3 overtimes are really exciting. So, katulad nung yung game ng Ateneo and UST. These heightened sports arousal and also excitement. Storylines like underdogs toppling champions, comebacks from 20 points down, redemption and dynasty stories are always fascinating. Star players, storied teams, and colorful coaches are irresistible to follow, lalo na kung guwapo. Fans experience success or status indirectly by supporting or identifying with teams or athletes, delivering emotional payoff without personal risk. It's a free gift, a psychological roller coaster ride that removes stress and provides an emotional high. So, sports is not going anywhere. And sports journalism now, and for generations to come, will have many exciting events to cover and write stories about. Although the nature of sports will change, with technology playing a big part in its transformation. Now, esports is already hugely popular. Extreme sports has its players and fans, and hybrid phygital experiences where athletes compete in video games with a real-world component like Pokemon Go or Assassin's Creed have their enthusiasts. Like early man, painting his physical conquests and recreational activities on the walls of caves in France, Egypt, Japan, and Mongolia, today's and tomorrow's sports journalists will continue to record similar events of their contemporary era using the media and tools that will best convey their stories. So, 3 cheers for sports journalism. It is as old as mankind itself and as new as the spark of an idea in an inventor's mind. And I thank you.
That was such an inspiring talk from Ma'am Tessa.
Maraming salamat po. Parang gusto ko, pwede ko po kayong mag-sports journal. Lipat ako na. Anyway, ngayon naman po, pumunta naman po tayo sa human rights journalism. I'd like to introduce Mr. Jerrie Abella. Jerrie M. Abella is a human rights campaigner from the Regional Office of Amnesty International covering the Philippines, Myanmar, and Malaysia. Before this, he was a reporting officer at the International Committee of the Red Cross, a journalist at GMA Network, and a journalism lecturer at St. Scholastica's College, Manila. He earned his journalism degree from then the College of Mass Communication of UP Diliman, where he also served as editor-in-chief of the Philippine Television. Everyone, please welcome Jerrie Abella.
Hello po, kaya pa. I hope to be able to make this really quick, so please bear with me and like Ma'am Tessa, magpagasalan din ako. So my lecture is titled Shatter the Looking Glass, Prospects for and Challenges to Human Rights Journalism in the Philippines. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat, and thank you all for joining this afternoon's lectures.
At the onset, I would like to thank the Dean of UP Diliman College of Media and Communication, Dr. Maria Josa Labiste, the Department of Journalism, the Office of Research and Publication, and the rest of the college for inviting me to take part in this series of talks to mark the college's 60th founding anniversary and offer what little insight I may have into the subject at hand, which is human rights journalism in the Philippines. Forgive me for starting off this lecture with a personal story, as being here right now reminded me of the last time I was here at the college's auditorium. It was in August 2019, 3 years into the murderous war on drugs of the Duterte administration. It was also about a month since the United Nations Human Rights Council voted in favor of a resolution to monitor and report on the human rights situation in the Philippines. That resolution offered hope, however little, to the thousands of families who lost their loved ones in this bloody campaign, whose impacts we still deal with as a nation and hope to recover from, and will continue to do so for generations to come. A month after that resolution, I joined various human rights defenders in this auditorium as panelists in a public forum to discuss what the resolution meant, not just for the human rights movement, but more importantly for the families, and how we could engage with the process it entailed to hopefully help put an end to the killings and associated human rights violations. The resolution, as we eventually saw, did not amount to much, as the killings continued under the Duterte administration, and they continue as we gather today, with already over 1,000 people killed in anti-drug operations by the police since 2022 under the Marcos administration. 6 years hence, the Philippines has once again been catapulted into global headlines. Duterte is now detained at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, Netherlands, to hopefully face trial for murder as a crime against humanity in relation to killings in the context of the war on drugs and also during his time as mayor of Davao City. It again offered a sliver of hope for justice and accountability, something that victims and families continue to be unable to find or at the very least seek through our domestic justice system. Beyond Duterte's detention, which we expect to continue following the court's denial of his request for interim release, it may of course take years for the ICC process to result in anything more concrete or tangible. But I share this story as a context nonetheless, to illustrate that despite and precisely because of the darkness we were thrust into as a nation, there were those who conscientiously chose to stand up and speak out despite grave personal risks to their lives and safety. Alongside families of victims and human rights defenders and organizations, journalists braved the fray to cover the aftermath of deadly anti-drug operations. They exposed the duplicity of the police and the government as a whole in the stories they spun to justify, however tenuously, the wanton violence for which their anti-drug campaign will be known in history. They brought to fore the voices of families of victims that were deliberately silenced through threats and intimidation, through disparaging narratives, and through an intolerable bureaucracy that made it nearly impossible, even dangerous, to secure something as basic as a police report or a death certificate. Stay lang po tayo sa slide na yan. In this lecture, I hope to draw lessons from the Philippines' journalistic practice during the war on drugs as we currently know it, while recognizing that another similar war has been waged for decades now against people who use drugs. I hope to use these lessons to present prospects for human rights journalism in the country and examine and address challenges that remain to its cogent practice. I hope to propose moving away from looking at human rights journalism as niche journalism and instead build the case for using human rights as an inclusive, universal lens through which journalists and communicators can look at, analyze, and help change communities in the world. Ultimately, as many have likewise done in the past, I hope to contribute to the collective effort to shatter the perception of journalism and media in general simply as a looking glass, to be held up to society as needed during moments of self-reflection without much regard for its immense potency for transformation. Next slide, please. Human rights journalism, interrogating what we think it is. I thought it best at the onset to interrogate what human rights journalism actually means. Next slide po. On the surface, when we think of human rights journalism, we almost automatically think of reportage that delves into egregious human rights violations and abuses, drawing heavily from testimonial and other evidence presented by victims, witnesses, and human rights monitors, and at times clearly identifying perpetrators, whether government or non-state actors such as corporations, and their obligations under domestic and international law, norms, and standards. They can be reports about allegations of extrajudicial killings, abduction, harassment, or arbitrary detention, often targeting specific segments of the population. For example, people accused of using or selling drugs, activists and human rights defenders, development and humanitarian workers, lawyers, environmentalists, indigenous peoples, and journalists themselves. They can be about allegations of torture and other ill treatment inside government-controlled spaces, such as detention places or even drug treatment and rehabilitation centers. Or claims they can be about the police's excessive use of force during protests, or claims of torture and ill treatment of arrested protesters by the police, including by repeatedly hitting their heads, legs, and hands with wooden sticks, especially when they try to look up because they were trying to catch a glimpse of the face of their tormentors, or the arrest and detention of protesters despite the absence of a clear and formal charge, all while lawyers and families were denied access to them or even information about their whereabouts. This last example is a direct reference to the appalling experiences of those arrested and detained following the September 21 protests against widespread government corruption. But this has yet to be more extensively reported, as it should be, by mainstream media. Next slide, please. In no uncertain terms, all these human rights reports are important. By exposing and detailing these violations and abuses, there is the obvious but often unsaid hope that the same will not be repeated, that victims and others like them who may become victims as well are lent a certain level of protection with the message to perpetrators that they are being watched. Beyond prevention, there is the expectation that following these reports, duty bearers will investigate the grave allegations, hold perpetrators to account, and ensure justice, accountability, remedies, and reparations for victims, survivors, and their families. Next slide, please. So I wanted to focus on journalism as evidence of human rights violations. So therein lies as well the other power of human rights journalism that until recently had mostly been unbeknownst to many, as veritable evidence of violations and abuses to serve as bases for corrective action. Next slide, please. The war on drugs is a terrible, terrible blight on Philippine society and history. But if one were to look for a bright spot during these dark times, one would be sure to find courage, clarity, and credibility in the multitude of journalistic reports around the war on drugs, on the killings and other violations, on police culpability in the government's incitement of violence and stigmatization, of the failure of the international community to take action, and most importantly, of the unfailing courage of families, communities, and human rights defenders to seek the truth, call for justice, and demand accountability. Next slide po. Indeed, international human rights organizations, including Amnesty International, at times referenced or took cues from media reports on the war on drugs in undertaking more in-depth research into the killings and other human rights violations. United Nations agencies, including the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, as well as the Special Rapporteurs, likewise consistently cited these media reports in their own documentation of the human rights toll of the drug war. More recently, in denying the request of Duterte's lawyer for his interim release, the International Criminal Court cited media reports on Vice President Sara Duterte's statements to illustrate that the Duterte family had the intention to help him evade detention and prosecution. In various fora, human rights groups both here and abroad would cite, alongside testimonies by families, the weight of journalistic reportage on the war on drugs as a compelling effort in preserving evidence that would hopefully be useful in future proceedings to exact justice and accountability. Next slide, please. It must be recognized, however, that reporting on the war on drugs and related issues has not always been rigorous when it comes to making the imperative links to respect for human rights, or the utter lack of it. Next slide po. The Center for Media Freedom and Responsibility, for example, correctly pointed out in its regular monitoring that during the first few months of this government campaign that began in 2016, journalists and media outfits were simply parroting government pronouncements, particularly on the numbers of people killed in police operations, as well as the circumstances surrounding such killings, mainly that they fought back or nanlaban, thereby supposedly necessitating the often fatal response from the police. A more critical and proactive coverage by local media of the unfolding crisis, according to the CMFR, began only when the death tallies had reached more than 500. During the first month or so of the Duterte administration, an abundance of media reports on the anti-drug campaign simply quoted police authorities and highlighted government figures, thereby signifying to an extent that the campaign had been working. And while there have been strides since then in the quality and quantity of drug war reportage in the country by alternative media like Pinoy Weekly and Bulatlat, but also by mainstream outfits like Rappler and The Inquirer, some critical gaps remain to date. One, there appears to be a prevailing sense of complacency when looking at the lack of media coverage of the continuing killings. While we are preoccupied with the ongoing ICC process, which is of course understandable, media seem to be missing or downplaying the fact that drug-related killings have not stopped. In the period of 1,203 days of the Marcos administration from June 30, 2022 to October 15, 2025, there had been 1,090 people killed during police-led anti-drug operations, according to media monitoring by the group called the HAS, or nearly one person killed every single day since the end of the Duterte administration. The numbers do not include killings that do not get reported by the media or are missed by the HAS monitoring. Looking at the resources of the group's database, many of the reports referenced are mere Facebook posts, mostly by radio news programs outside Metro Manila, that mirror the kind of superficial reporting of copy-paste police reports that we have unfortunately seen during the first month of the war on drugs. Police are quoted as describing how they engaged in a buy-bust operation targeting an individual who eventually sensed they are being targeted, leading them to pull out a gun and fight back, thereby necessitating the police's use of lethal force. Next slide, please. A second gap, beyond the inadequate reporting of continuing drug-related killings and other human rights violations, there remains, especially in crime reporting, a consistent resort to stigmatizing language that has for decades dangerously fueled violence, targeting people accused of using drugs, including the ongoing war on drugs. Reports dealing with heinous crimes such as murder or rape would often involve details of how the suspect tested positive for using a particular illicit substance, without interrogating whether or not including such information is actually relevant to the report, as if drug use is the sole reason that people commit crimes. In May this year, following an expressway bus accident that killed 10 people and injured 30 others, news outfits carried reports of government plans to require drivers of public utility vehicles to undergo mandatory drug testing every 9 days. Transportation Secretary Vince Dizon was quoted as saying, "I was absolutely furious when I heard on the news that the driver from Solid North refused to take a drug test. He has no choice. You killed someone and now you're refusing a drug test." The reports made no attempts whatsoever to question the wisdom behind the proposed measure, including, for example, by checking whether the government can show scientific studies proving that majority of fatal accidents are caused by people who use drugs. The reports never bothered to mention, likely owing to a lack of awareness, that mandatory drug testing violates the person's rights to privacy, bodily autonomy, and physical integrity. Next slide. By using stigmatizing language in their reportage, that is, blaming drug use for the prevalence of crimes without requiring a shred of evidence or factual basis from government and other resources, journalists, whether they are aware or not, contribute to the ill-conceived and oft-abused sense that drug use is the ultimate evil that requires all means necessary, including those that violate human rights, to be ended. This failure of interrogation and lack of rigor, in effect, has enabled violent responses targeting people accused of using drugs, including, of course, the brutal war on drugs. Next slide, please. A third gap that I wanted to discuss may best be articulated by going back to defining human rights journalism, this time by talking about what it is supposedly not, rather than what it is. Next slide po. Run-of-the-mill reports about police demolition of makeshift houses in an impoverished community, or about people sent to prison after getting caught stealing packets of milk or a few canned goods, or about community barricades against mining corporations being dismantled because they are supposedly illegal, all these are not typically considered human rights journalism, in that they seldom employ, even peripherally at the very least, any sort of human rights angle or lens. Next slide po. Instead of talking about the right to housing, reports about demolitions hone in on the spectacle of violence that often ensues during these activities, particularly with informal/illegal settlers accused of instigating chaos by throwing rocks, bottles, or even fecal matter at demolition teams. Stories about petty theft are so written as to inspire feelings of awe or pity, or of forgiveness, or even of generosity by tracking down the poor thief and raising funds for them, but never any feelings of righteous indignation over what should have obviously been a breach of the right to adequate food. Community barricades against mining activities, made up of repurposed tarpaulins, iron sheets, or bamboo, are described as illegal, even hostile, especially when mining companies present legal permits, as in the case of a mining exploration in Nueva Vizcaya that is recently making the headlines, while conveniently ignoring people's rights to freedom of expression, assembly, and association. Next slide po. This perhaps is the main proposition I wanted to make. As I have mentioned earlier, human rights journalism, perceived as a form of niche journalism that exposes grave human rights violations, is all well and good. Next slide po. It serves to protect victims, prevent the recurrence of abuses, effect investigations, remedies, and reparations, contribute to efforts towards justice and accountability, and preserve credible evidence, especially when judicial proceedings are nearly impossible to undertake or evidently dangerous for the victims and their families at a given time. Next slide po. But we live, and may unfortunately likely continue to live, at a time when human rights are flouted at every turn, so much that we miss, or we are made to miss, the critical links between human rights and what would seem like an everyday banal occurrence. The right to education in the face of perennial classroom shortages or low wages for teachers, the right to housing in the context of cities seemingly bursting at the seams while condominium constructions are ubiquitous, the right to food, water, and other basic needs vis-a-vis unrelenting inflation, inadequate services, and rising unemployment, the right to freedom of expression when a simple social media post can land you in jail, and the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association, stifled by the possibility of being arrested and detained simply for wearing a black shirt. Next slide po. My proposition thus is to go beyond looking at human rights journalism as niche journalism and practice it at every opportunity we can find. We have long moved past the idea of a journalist as a passive chronicler of our times, tasked simply with fabricating a looking glass that reflects society as it is, sans any insight, interpretation, or influence. We have seen the dangers of this positioning, especially in the last 9 years or so of the gravest human rights violations in the country's recent history, when journalists were exhorted not just to echo government pronouncements, but more importantly to probe, to dig deeper, to ask questions and provide context, to demand evidence, to call out abuses by exposing them, and to hold power accountable by speaking the truth. Human rights journalism cannot simply remain as a form of niche journalism with narrow targets, specialized subjects, and a smaller and specific audience. The practice of journalism itself is steeped in and made possible by human rights. Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for example, guarantees that everyone the right to freedom of opinion and expression, including the freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Next slide po. And as with any other, human rights as a journalistic tool is only as good as the one who wields it. It is therefore imperative for current and future journalists to arm themselves with the knowledge of some instruments that form the foundational legal framework for human rights. This is not to say, of course, that journalists need to be human rights experts themselves. A basic knowledge of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for example, can be applied to practically all current and relevant socio-political issues, even those that may not necessarily or apparently involve the greatest human rights violations, such as corruption, health, the economy, governance, elections, unemployment, and more. Being aware of the government's obligations under international law, or speaking to groups and resource persons who may have such knowledge, likewise allows us to identify instances of failure to uphold such obligations as important contextual information. With that, I hope to end this lecture with the reiteration that human rights is a lens and not just a kind of journalism. It is a lens through which journalists can look at the world and its vicissitudes in hope of crafting truth-based narratives that offer alternatives, inspire action, and drive positive change. It is a tool to draw the sharpest line. Muli, marami pong salamat sa pagkakataong makapagbahagi ngayong hapon at magandang araw po sa ating lahat.
Thank you very much, Jerrie, for giving us a sober
Appreciation for human rights journalism. Ayan. Palakpakan naman po natin ulit ang ating tatlong speakers. Okay. Thank you so much po. Ngayon naman po, we'll open the floor for question and answer. So we'd like to invite our speakers sa stage po, please. Thank you. Blue Ribbon Committee po ba? Hindi naman.
Yes, Your Honor. No, Your Honor.
Sige po, bukas na po ang ating floor for questions. Baka po may gusto pong itanong ang ating mga students and other participants.
Nakaabot sa lecture ko, walang matanong.
Ayan, magsimula po si Dean.
Parang sinakoleta ito.
Hello, magandang hapon sa inyo. I'm so happy to have heard all of you. And
how your lectures would contribute to the scholarship of journalism and practice of the course. What is, I think, common thread is that your journalism, whether sports, whether motoring and human rights, shouldn't be made. So you thread in the practice. It's not the other folk.
journalism. In other words, common sa inyo sinasabi, they should be mainstream. They should really be part of journalism. We shouldn't even have a name for it because it's really about journalism. Parang may isang, kayo, you're of one mind of it. How did you come to think of it? And what should be, for example, its implication for us when we teach journalism? Kasi kami yung mga teachers. And if it's not other journalism, what should it be then? How should we teach our students the kind of journalism that you want us to teach them?
Hello. Ayun. Okay. At least on my end, no, na on motoring, kasi it's always been traditionally considered other. It's it's not news. I mean, it's not news. It's not crime. It's not House beat, Senate beat now. That people think, oh, it's not really that important. I think we have to start with that attitude on what we consider important and unimportant as media scholars as well. That stories aren't just about traditional news things. And the idea that many of the events at St. Motoring are related or a product of other things, of institutional failures, of regulatory failures, which we as journalists must uncover and must bring the attention of people to this and perhaps contribute to the discourse of those things. So I guess the answer to that being a very difficult question actually. Apart siguro from maybe opening a subject or a course on motoring or human rights reporting, no, is to really really emphasize the importance of making connections. That it may seem, medyo pa-cute or medyo parang individualistic yung story, but there's a bigger picture that we have a responsibility to address.
Ang tingin ko po dyan din ay, when we say mainstream news, we're talking about news, yung front page, back page, yun yung talaga mainstream. Pero as we know, newspapers and news websites all have different sections. So, nandun yung business, nandun yung motoring, nandun yung sports, nandun yung lifestyle. And so, ang talagang general lang, yung news. Pero I think the fact that there are definite, ongoing, major sections of news websites and newspapers exclusively dedicated to these topics makes them actually mainstream. They're not really niche because there are enthusiasts or readers or those involved in or interested, let's say in the motoring industry, cars, mobility, and so forth. Maybe may ibang nila, like halimbawa na hindi naman sa sinasabi ko hindi pwede. Let's say the average jeepney driver, baka hindi connected sa kanya yun, di ba? Pero baka hindi siya masyadong mahilig dun sa mga flashy cars na ginagraduate ng pagabi ko. Pero ano siya, kumbaga, it's there for everyone to, like, sa lifestyle naman, merong hindi masyadong mahilig sa fashion or homemaking or what, pero it's still there because it caters to the actual interests and needs of everybody. Hindi lang siya kasi matter of life and death na news.
Hello po. Una po, lilinawin ko lang na hindi po kami nag-usap para sabihin yung motoring journal or human rights journal hindi dapat niche. Siguro po gaya ng nabanggit ko kanina, para sa akin, sa palagay ko, yung karapatang pantao ay isang lens na kaya mong ilapat sa kahit anong usapin. Halimbawa, nung nag-lecture si Sir tungkol sa motoring, nabanggit yung electronic vehicles, yung batteries. Naalala ko na dahil meron tayong merong push para lumikha ng mas maraming electronic vehicles, meron big push na sa nickel mining. Tapos anong nangyayari? Sa Zambales, sa Palawan, naiiwan yung mga komunidad dealing with health-related issues, destruction of their environment. So, nailapat yung human rights na anggulo
doon sa usapin na yon. Siguro kapag sinasabi ko po na hindi dapat ituring na niche journalism ang human rights, ang tinutukoy ko po ay hindi dapat, kasi pag sinabi nating niche journalism, malinaw na meron kang target
na audience, specific, narrow. Feeling ko, especially sa konteksto ng Pilipinas, ang paglabag sa karapatang tao ay kaliwat kanan. Kailangang linawin sa lahat ng mambabasa, tagapakinig ng balita, na practically, lahat ng usapin na pinag-uusapan natin ngayon ay mayroong anggulong human rights. So hindi dapat i-target ang pag-uulat sa karapatang pantao sa isang spesipikong bahagi ng populasyon. Dapat nakatarget siya sa lahat. Dapat lahat ay iniengganyo magbasa ng makaalam ng mga usapin may kinalaman sa karapatang pantao. Salamat po.
Magandang hapon po, John Vic Mateo po ng Journal Department. Dudugtungan ko na yung conversation dun sa niche at pag-mainstream or pagdagdag nung lens, specifically sa human rights, kasi dito rin ako mas particularly familiar. I think we are seeing a reimagining, pero medyo mabagal siya when it comes to beat reporting, for example, na I acknowledge na meron siyang practicality nung umusbong yung konsepto ng beat reporting. But over the course of the years, and most especially the past few years, nakita natin yung limitations din ng pagkakaroon ng beat reporting. Halimbawa, nung pandemic at yung konsepto ng health beat reporting na before pandemic, hindi naman talaga natin siya nakikita. Ganun din sa human rights, sa someone who's been covering this, someone who's been in this beat for over a decade. Ang isang tinatayuan ko sa human rights sa concept ay hindi talaga siya dapat beat. Perhaps necessary na merong isa na nagbabantay doon sa mga issues na nabanggit doon sa lecture. Pero tama rin na hindi kasi siya limitado doon sa issue na yon. If you're in the health beat, there's a human rights element there. If you're in the education beat, even in transportation, in motoring, in sports even, more recently nakikita natin yung magagandang storya on sports from our human rights perspective. Siguro ang tanong lang din, for everyone, but specifically rin kay Jerrie on human rights, how do we introduce this concept of human rights as a lens in journalism, in journalistic reporting, sa mga journalists na matagal nang nagpa-practice, na meron ng proseso sa kung paano nila ginagawa yung trabaho. Paano natin babaguhin yung mindset na dapat ganito yung pagtingin natin sa human rights or dun sa iba't ibang mga field na gusto nating i-push in journalism.
Salamat, John Vic. Mangunguna na ako. Bago ang lahat, bago ako nag-ICRC or GMA or Amnesty International, nagtrabaho ko bilang isa sa dalawang staff ng National Union of Journalists of the Philippines bilang safety officer. So umiikot kami sa buong bansa, nakikipag-usap sa mga mamamahayag. Kalakhan sa kanila hindi bata. Ang nakikipag-usap sa kanila tungkol sa paano gamitin or kung paano ang human rights reporting, anong mga tools, anong knowledge ang necessary para magawa nila yung human rights reporting or para mailapat yung human rights na anggulo sa pagsusulat nila. At kalakhan ng mga tugon na nakuha namin ay lahat naman sila malay or lahat sila aware kung ano yung human rights. Pero nagulat sila kung paano mo i-illustrate, kung paano ilapat yung human rights sa pag-uulat. Halimbawa, hindi naman necessary na kapag nagre-report ka on demolitions, hindi naman kailangan na tahasan mong sabihin na ito ay paglabag sa karapatan, sa pabahay ng mga tao. Hindi necessary yon. Hindi ganun yung sinasabi nating human rights reporting. Although useful yon, pero hindi siya necessary. Parang para sa akin, ang mas mahalagang pagtingin, kapag inilapat natin ang human rights angle sa pag-cover ng demolition stories halimbawa, kapag ang lente natin ay human rights, hindi tayo tutuon sa kaguluhan, hindi tayo tutuon sa ilegalidad ng mga struktura nung naitinayo ng mga tao, hindi tayo tutuon dun sa violence kuno na sinimulan ng mga pamilyang dinidemolish doon. Pero nakatutok tayo sa ilang pamilya ang epektado, ilang kabataan siguro, meron bang proyekto para sa kanila para may paglipatan sila, anong kasaysayan ng lugar, yung mga ganong impormasyon, yung nagiging tuon ng balita at hindi yung sensational o yung kaguluhan. So parang gano'n, para sa akin kasi kahit yung mga hindi na or yung mga matagal na sa gawain nila bilang mamamahayag, palagay ko hindi lang sila nabigyan ng pagkakataon na mas pag-isipan pa kung paano ilalapat ang lente ng karapatang pantao sa pagsusulat. Kasi hindi rin naman yun yung hinihingin halimbawa ng mainstream media. Pero kapag binigyan mo sila ng pagkakataon, binigyan ng mga halimbawa, kasi ito na yung mga report na sinusulat nila. Sinusulat lang nila sa paraang alam nila, pero kapag inalok mo ng ibang pamamaraan kung paano isulat ang isang particular na balita at kung paano ilapat ang lente ng karapatang tao. Kalakhan naman, doon sa mga nakausap ko many years ago, ay bukas sa ganong pamamaraan. So siguro bilang panghuli na lang, mas kailangan ng kaalaman. Halimbawa sa usapin ng drug policy, balak naming isalin yung terminology na nilikha ng International Network of People Using Drugs, kung paano maging non-stigmatizing at respectful ang lengguwahe sa pag-uulat. So balak namin siyang isalin at ipamahagi sa mga mamamahayag para bigyan sila ng ibang option, ibang kaalaman sa kung paano maging mas malay sa karapatang pantao kapag nag-uulat. Salamat po.
Effectively, sir, I think your question is about teaching an old dog new tricks, effectively, no? All I can say on that is, on one level, maybe the college itself can be instrumental in that, na maybe may workshops kayo for practitioners, similar to what Cal does sa mga intensive English program nila for professionals. That might be something that the college can also push for current practitioners. Kasi ang profession naman natin, we don't have it's not like sa mga lawyers that they have to take remedial courses to maintain their standing, you know. So maybe that's something we here at CMC can do. And in terms of also, what do you call this? Ano ba yun? Sorry, yeah. May memory gap na ako eh. I'm not as youthful as my seatmate here, no? Pero also on another level, even at why wait for them to grow old and then let's try to engage even our students now into looking at maybe at soft or niche. In fact, the duality of soft and hard journalism is sort of shifting already. So maybe let's not look at it strictly na soft and hard. Maybe we should look at it in a different perspective, no? Yun. And in this job kasi, if you have to be willing to learn, no? As Ma'am Tessa very very brilliantly put, no, na they have to you have to keep evolving with the job, diba? Learning the new technologies, learning the new approaches, or else you'll be outdated. Your readers won't follow you, diba? You lose your readership. So it's very important that yung mga kahit tumanda ka na sa profession na to, diba? You have to keep striving. If you want to stay here, you have to keep striving to learn all of these things. Para I can be eternally youthful like Ma'am Tessa, diba? Yung sikreto na lang.
Ako naman, magko-contribute po ako ng konti. Siyempre, yung bias ko is public information and public relations. So, pwede naman from the outside looking in instead of from within, na yung, let's say, yung mga organizations na talagang dedicated dyan sa pag-propagate ng human rights ay gumawa ng isang communication campaign na talagang pangmalawakan and at the same time talagang pumapasok dun sa kumbaga sa capillaries ng communication natin. For instance, you can part of the campaign is halimbawa inserting the topic or the issue or the concerns of human rights into teleseries or yung mga soft na na ang pasok sa tao ay awareness and at the same time mas naiintindihan nila, hindi yung talagang hard na ito parang instructional. They can learn better through stories. Parang ang entry ay hindi sa front door kundi sa kusina, sa back door, na mas nagiging mas subtle yung kanilang pag accept nung kasi it's non-threatening, it's not forced, but it's more of an idea that they can talk, parang digest in their own way, or probably go into an active and aggressive communication campaign, advertising campaign, depending on halimbawa, ita-timing yon sa a particular occasion or month na pang human rights, na gano'n, para lahat, hindi lamang yung mga practitioners, but everybody is aware of human rights. Syempre, ang end goal natin doon would be for everybody to be aware of it and conversant with it and isa puso na nila yon para mismo yung news na babasahin nila, hahanap sila ng content na gano'n or angle na gano'n na masasagot yung kanilang mga katanungan about human rights. Yun lang po.
Don't be scared. Anything about like
May tanong pa po ba?
how to start, how would you start out?
Sabihin mo na kaya kahit wala pa
Sige. Nakakahilig yun. How do you get started? That's been a topic na even when I was still studying here as an undergrad, ano yung trabaho natin would be, kasi I think in sports journal maraming mga automated na writing, well, sa ibang sports outlets automated na yung mga ibang reports, and even sa mga wire services they sometimes do that. Ako kasi I'm still number one, I'm not very conversant with AI. I'm still, in fact, I still use, alam ni Ma'am Tessa to, I still use pen and paper. Pag coverage. Nakikita niyo, nagsusulat ako. Because I don't need an internet connection to write my stories, no. AI, I feel, at least in terms of the practice or in terms of the profession, will have a contribution in maybe making newsroom processes faster, or maybe getting the story out faster. But at the end of the day, it's the technology is only as good as the user. So if you can use AI, but you can't write, or you don't know how to write, you'll be very fast at publishing something that nobody wants to read. So ganun lang din. So kaya I'm lucky you're in the best journalism school in the Philippines, and I always tell that to all my friends, especially in the other schools, na we're trained in a very unique manner. Na when you get sent out, you will have to adjust, but you have the fundamentals down, no? So back then, when I was starting out, hindi pa magaganda ang mga camera ng cellphone noon, so I still had to carry a separate camera, diba? But when the technology evolved and I had to learn the technology, I had to learn video editing, photo editing, you again, goes back to the point now, you have to evolve with to stay, I hope to stay in the profession as long as Ma'am Tessa, but if you're gonna stay in the profession this long, you have to follow, not only do you have to be conversant with the technology, but your fundamentals of journalism must be very strong. Yun. Sa AI mo yan.
Ano ko lang sa AI, bistado ng AI. Tingin ko, alam na din natin kung ano ang AI generated. Kahit halimbawa, papers na sinasubmit sa atin, alam natin kung AI, meron siya sarili niyang language eh. So, alam natin kung hindi flesh and blood ang gumawa nun. But some writers I know, ang ginagawa daw nila, para to work against the challenge of deadlines, mga ganyan, pinapa-AI muna para ma-edit, malinis, and then they add on their own personal writing or style. May gano'n. Para lang tanggalin yung kuyagot, yung Tagalog, tapos doon na siya. Para magkaroon lang ng structure. Para ka nag-e-edit. Kasi mas madaling magsulat kung minsan pag meron ka nang ine-edit. Eh. So, gano'n ang ginagawa nila sa AI.
Sige po, Sir Jerry.
Sorry po, mabilis lang. Kung usapin naman po ng pag-uulat hinggil sa karapatang pantao, palagay ko hindi o matagal pa bago mapalitan ng AI. Kasi maraming kahiingian yung pag-uulat hinggil sa karapatang pantao, pakipag-usap sa mga biktima, pagpunta sa pinakamalalayong bahagi ng bansa, halimbawa, pagtukoy sa obligasyon ng mga gobyerno or korporasyon na palagay ko ay hindi pa. Siguro pili lang din kasi yung impormasyong na-feed sa AI at consequently ay iniluluwa niya. Wala pang masyadong feeling ko usapin ng human rights doon. Pero Pinakamahalaga kasi sa pag-uulat hinggil sa karapatang pangtao ay yung pag-ugnay sa tao, sa biktima, sa pamilya, sa human rights organizations, sa gobyerno. So, yung pakikipag-ugnay na yun, feeling ko hindi ma-replicate ng AI. Salamat po.
Thank you. Sige po. While we're waiting for questions, maybe, meron po ba? Go ahead.
Ako po.
Ayan na. Okay.
Mausisa yung batang yan.
Hello po, I'm Claire. I'm a second-year journalism student. My question is directed towards Sir Jerry. Since you've mentioned we've mentioned briefly po earlier on your lecture about war on drugs. Parang, I'm curious lang din po, where do you draw the line between being an activist, an advocate, and being a journalist? Like, where should the line be drawn, or should there be a line drawn in the first place po? Thank you so much.
Salamat. Suko na ako. Hindi, joke. Paano ba? Para sa akin kasi, nahirati ako sa alternative advocacy journalism. So, mula Philippine Collegian hanggang kahit nasa GMA ako, ang tinutukan ko ay mga migrante sa ibang bansa, mga migranteng Pilipino at yung mga pang-aapi at pang-aabuso na dinaranas nila. Tapos, yun, tuloy-tuloy na. So, para sa akin kasi bago ang lahat, tayo ay tao. Bago tayo naging mamamahayag, bago tayo naging advocate, bago tayo naging kung ano paman, tayo ay tao, naiintindihan natin kung ano ang dapat na tinatamasa ng isang tao. Yun lang. Yun lang para sa akin yung gabay. Siguro yung linya ay naguguhit sa anyo o sa forma ng pag-uulat mo. Siyempre, kung nagsusulat ka ng balita, hindi mo tahasang sasabing ibagsak ang imperialismo, US, ganyan, or something like that. Pero pareho tayo. Parang, kung ikaw ay aktivista, ako ay mamamahayag, pareho tayo ng pinaniniwalaan. Palagay ko yung hamon sa atin ay humanap ng paraan para masabi yung parehong mensahe sa magkaibang paraan. So, ang aktivista, magrarally halimbawa sa kalye, pero ang mamamahayag, magbabalita tungkol sa ano ba ang epekto ng imperialismong US halimbawa sa Pilipinas na nakabatay sa facts, nakabatay sa interviews, nakabatay sa government statements, for example. So para sa akin, yung drawing the line is simply in terms of the manner by which we do what we choose to do. So tayo, mga advocate, human rights defenders, activists, journalists, environmentalists, pare-pareho tayo ng sinasabi, pero magkakaiba tayo ng paraan. Tapos feeling ko, yun yung hamon talaga sa mamamahayag. Paano mo, kasi hindi mo kailangan, bilang mamamahayag, hindi mo kailangan ng slogan, hindi mo kailangan ng mga kawikaan. Kailangan mo lang yung katotohanan. Kailangan mo lang yung facts. Kung gusto mong sabihing masama ang korupsyon, kailangan mong i-illustrate sa pamamagitan ng figures, halimbawa, o konkretong epekto ng korupsyon, halimbawa sa kakulangan ng mga silid sa paaralan, halimbawa. So, pareho lang tayo ng sinasabi, pero bilang mamamahayag, halimbawa, gagamitin ko yung impormasyong meron ako, yung mga panayam ko sa mga relevant na tao para ipahayag yung gusto kong sabihin.
I'd like to add to that actually, ang ganda ng sagot ni Sir Jerry, of course. I'd like to contend actually that journalism is an advocacy. Diba? Because it's an advocacy in which that's why we're media, or we're mass communication, so to speak, because we're serving the public good. That's always going to be, and that's an advocacy that cuts across all beats, all types of reporting, all types, whether it's motoring or sports or human rights. We are effectively advocates of something. We are advocates of human rights. We are advocates of mobility. We're advocates of sportsmanship and the power of sports and all of these things. And again, tama Sir Jerry, it's the manner in which you write it will. You can, for example, write a news article about this particular issue, and you can write an opinion piece about this issue in which you're more forceful about a certain argument. Our profession allows for that, for those avenues or channels to be exercised. No, so yeah, we're all advocates in some sense. Sometimes, perhaps, we have certain advocacies that we cannot mix with hard news reporting, but it will be useful in other types of reporting. Especially kung, let's say, kami ni Ma'am Tessa or even Sir Jerry, we're passionate about the things we're writing about. So talagang nahahalo yung aming advocacy, yung aming passion into the work. Diba? In fact, one of the studies I included in my paper, you'll be able to read it siguro later on, is how yung paghalo ng passion into the profession is negative and positive thing. It's helpful and it's also harmful. And there are certain lines that must be drawn, but those lines I think already exist in the profession, when to be an advocate and when to be a reporter.
Wala na po akong sasabihin, hindi na po ako mag-cooperate.
Ayun mo, may right naman.
Ako.
Okay. May tanong pa po ba tayo? Okay na? Alright. So, maraming salamat po ulit, Sir Jerry, Sir VJ, and Ma'am Tessa. Thank you. Salamat. Okay. And now, I'd like to call on Dean Josa to give the certificate.
Mag-graduate?
Okay.
Magkaka-MA ako.
Sige po. Okay. Basahin ko po. So, this certificate of appreciation is given to Froilan Victor Bacungan Jr. as guest lecture presenter in the Signal Boost CMC's Diamond Talks organized by the Office of Research and Publication and the Department of Journalism, given this 21st day of October 2025 at the UP College of Media and Communication, University of the Philippines, Diliman, Quezon City.
Tan, 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 tan.
Wow, ang ganda.
Wow. Ang ganda ng diploma ko.
And at the same time po, this certificate of appreciation is given to Maria Teresa Jasmines.
PhD na ba ito, ma'am?
And finally, again, the certificate of appreciation is given to Mr. Jerrie M. Abella.